Everybody, we just have a really quick disclaimer with this podcast. Nigel has asked us to make sure that we do state that what we're talking about in this podcast is the therapeutic use of psychedelics, and that everything we're talking about here is happening within a controlled and safe environment in a very intentional way. So whilst we will refer to psychedelics being very safe throughout this podcast, what we're not saying is that you should try this at home without therapeutic support and process.
Hi, I'm Jess. Today we're opening up on Ceremony for enthusiasts, iconoclasts, anarchists, and you. Everybody, you are about to meet the amazing Nigel Pedlingham, who I am very, very excited to introduce. I got really, really lucky meeting him in Brighton because we just happened to be sitting outside the same cafe on the same day, thinking similar thoughts. And I was sharing with a potential celebrant all about ceremonies, why we do them, what they're about. And there's this gorgeous guy sat opposite, really smartly dressed. I remember, Nigel, you just being very neat and suave. And I thought, he looks really interesting. And he was just smiling to himself the whole time and like making doodles on notes. I don't know what you were writing. And then afterwards, he had this lovely courage to come up to me and say, I have to admit, I've been earwigging on your conversation, and then gave me a card and then said, well, and we exchanged numbers and said, let's catch up. And we did. And to my amazement, he got in touch and we met up for coffee, and it was like we've known each other forever, and talked shop about ceremony. Now, I'm going to just read out to you all who Nigel is in his own words so that you can get some kind of sense of just how lucky you are to meet him and how lucky I am to have met him. So, Nigel is a change maker, a social justice advocate, a consciousness guide, a ceremony leader, and a psychedelic facilitator, as well as being a loving husband and a father. He is the founder of MAGUEY, and you can look up MAGUEY, MAGUEY, and it's a practice for healing and growth based in Amsterdam. He is also the chair of the Guide of Guides Netherlands, a lover of nature, stillness, and the unknown, and identifies as a modern mystic in the making, which I fully agree with. Nigel brings a unique blend of experience to service formed from 50 years of well-trodden path, rather like myself, but wait till you hear what he's done. A journey with many twists and turns. He has lived in the UK, in London and Brighton, all the best places, the Netherlands and Nicaragua, quite different. They start with them, but they're not the same, and worked and travelled extensively across Europe, Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America. His work experience spans the corporate, non-profit, volunteer, and healing and self-development sectors. He has worked from the boardroom to the bush and everything in between, working with CEOs, government ministers, community health workers, digital human rights campaigners, the homeless, the queer community, spiritual seekers, and those in search of healing. Along the way, there have been a few serious burnouts, very familiar to many of us, some broken hearts, also very familiar to many of us, a coming out, and the finding of true love, also familiar to many of us. So all of which have contributed to his personal process, emergence, and growth. Now, as a coach, a ceremony leader, a psychedelic facilitator, he enjoys supporting others to develop a more conscious and authentic connection with themselves and what's around them, which, I mean, we've talked this over, but that really is very much what ceremony is about in my book and his. So that's part of the thing, really, that we're going to hear about. So he truly believes that healing and broadening horizons at the individual level not only fosters individual growth and creativity, and I totally agree, but actively contributes to the collective of our society, which is so important and I think really doesn't get talked about enough. In 2020, we all know what happened in 2020. He set about doing a really positive thing, and that was when he founded MAGUEY, a practice for healing and for growth based in Amsterdam. MAGUEY supports seekers to connect more deeply with self, surrounding, and spirit. I really love that line. I think that's so important. And at its heart are a number of transformational coaching programs that support those who wish to consciously integrate psychedelics into their pathway of growth, which is a really current thing that it's very popular and it's very safe. And what I wanted was to introduce you to a really safe pair of hands in this arena. Because as we all know, it's not always the case for everything. And I think if you find a safe pair of hands and you know that they can bring something good to you, then it's really important to share them with the world. I want you all to know him and hear all about his story the way I did. So there you go. That's who you are, Nigel. Just so you know. You're quite impressive, right?
It's quite nice to hear that being read by someone else.
I mean, it's probably quite strange, but I do think it is important, because when else is anyone going to do that? You probably won't do that for yourself. And it's amazing. And I think when you want to get out and tell people who you are and what you have to offer them, you do kind of have to do it. So I've done it on your behalf. So welcome to my baby, my passion, my great big new adventure that I'm so excited about. I think you were one of the first people I talked to about it and one of the first people I invited on. So it's been really fantastic. But what I'm really pleased about is that we waited until we had exactly the right time and the right place. So Nigel's in Amsterdam, in that beautiful place there with that amazing chest behind him. And I'm here in Brighton, where you used to live, didn't you?
I did indeed, yeah.
You still come back quite a lot, don't you?
As much as I can.
So I'm looking forward to seeing you again. So is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners before we get going?
Oh, do you know what I would really like to do, rather than say anything to our listeners before we actually get going talking, is just take a moment of stillness. Whether that works on a podcast or not, I don't know, but I find that just coming into these things and taking a pause can just really help set the scene for all of us, both speaker and listener.
So it's so counter-cultural. I did a funeral the other day, and one of the feedback things was, we loved that you put in so many long pauses. And they can naturally feel quite uncomfortable when you're the person facilitating them, but I love that you did that. I am going to dive in with my first question before we get on to what you do and your life experience. So your best experience of a ceremony that you've ever had? You can have more than one if you like.
Yeah, I think I'm going to need more than one, because I have a whole list as long as my arm. Let's start with, I'll give you I'll keep it to two. And one I'll share with you because it's the most recent. We talked about it just the other day, in fact. And it's a really simple example. 2 weeks ago, I was lucky enough to be granted dual citizenship. So I'm now a citizen of both the United Kingdom and the Netherlands. And I've lived here for 8 years. And it's been quite a process to assimilate into another culture and to take the decision to become a citizen of that country. And it's involved a huge amount of work, a lot of studying, a lot of preparing, a lot of exams, a lot of expense, a lot of waiting. And finally, it happened 2 weeks ago, the granting of this citizenship. And what was very nice about it is it's not just the arrival of a piece of paper going, yeah, you are now this. It's actually done and facilitated through the format of ceremony. So all of us that day were being granted citizenship were invited to a ceremony at the town hall here in Amsterdam, where there was various things said, kind of what's expected about becoming Dutch, what you're getting about becoming Dutch, why you're doing this, the beauties of culture. And then there were about 100 people in the room who were receiving their citizenship from 25 different countries, all of whom have got a very, very different life story. But what we were that day was all united in doing this one thing together. And for me, there was quite a rational choice in deciding to do this thing. But what the ceremony did was really tap into something way deeper. And I think the important bit that I wanted to share was there was a moment where I think I had I'd gone up to the front of the room to swear in and to get my piece of paper that then actually tells you that you're now a citizen. And I got back to my table after that, and all of a sudden something lands. And I'd seen this in the other people that had gone up before you. You just see this thing happen, which is a little bit undescribable, of where something deeper than rationality kind of kicks in. And I was really emotional. And there were times during that where really emotion just came up. Tears came to my eyes. And this magic happened. And that's what happens in ceremonies, isn't it? Magic appears. However you want to define the term magic, that container does something and it allows something sacred to emerge. And what we don't have to do is put a name on what that is. It's just something that happens that's beyond our rational thinking. And that's what happened to me in that moment, this wave of emotion, this landing, this like, oh, I've done it. I'm here. And the ceremony was really a vehicle for enabling that to happen. It really made it so clear how important doing that ceremony for me was, and for the others, I think, in that room. So that was one that I wanted to share because it's very current, it's very meaningful, and it's so easy to not do that. And it's so easy not to celebrate these things. So, I followed it up with inviting a group of people around for drinks afterwards. And again, that's very easy not to do, but it's so nice to do. And again, it just brings in that. It brings in community. It's nice to have people celebrate with you. It's nice to communicate and come together over something so special.
That's so brilliant. I've never heard anyone talk about those ceremonies. Full stop. I don't even really know what they would look like in the UK, so it's really nice.
I also don't know, but I imagine a similar format. It's more about being stated the values of the country you're about to join, the gravity of the thing you're about to do, because it is quite a thing, isn't it? Some people are actually giving up a citizenship to become another citizen, so it is a big thing. And
it's a transition.
Yeah, it's a really big transition. And up until that moment, it's just often been something that's been written on paper or something you've clicked a box on a computer. Whereas what this does is it actually turns it into something real.
And you can feel it in your body.
You really understand what your and you feel it in your body. I feel it in my body now as I talk. And that's what the ceremonies can do.
That's so incredible, isn't it? And do you feel different?
Yeah.
Do you feel Dutch?
Yeah, no, I can't say I feel Dutch. I've been British way longer than I am Dutch, and I find the whole concept around that quite strange. I more and more in my life am trying to refrain from starting any sentence of "I am." So this identification of citizenship, I found it actually quite bizarre because, what does it mean to be this or that?
And you've been all over the world, haven't you? So
I've lived all over the world. I've worked with people all over the world. I feel as comfortable here as I do there. I feel as comfortable with this person as that person. So then to really hang your coat on such a peg of identification seems counterintuitive to me. So do I feel different? No. But something is different because I now have the freedoms of saying I am a citizen of two places. So it gives me different rights, different responsibilities. So there is something different.
A commitment to everything that you've made a decision for.
Exactly, because that's again what was brought up in the ceremony. It's not just what you get as becoming a citizen, it's what you then have to commit in being one. And I found that exchange actually a really important topic.
It's so lovely that you shared that. I'm hoping there'll be somebody listening who will identify with it.
I hope so too.
And what's your second one?
Yeah, the second one is perhaps more relevant to conversation we're going to be having throughout this podcast today, and that is a plant medicine ceremony. some years ago now, but really it is one of those points in life. We all have these milestones in life where either something significant happens. There's often a before and after point at that milestone. And this is one of those. This ceremony, went beyond anything that I was expecting and did create one of those breaks in time where there is a before that ceremony and after that ceremony, and nothing really has been or will be the same for me since. It was a retreat I had gone on for a few days, and at the heart of that retreat was then a plant medicine ceremony. In this case, it was an ayahuasca ceremony, beautifully curated by a very loving group of people, utterly transformational from my perspective. I've been a seeker and a wanderer and a doer my whole life, so everything essentially was leading up until that point. There lots of groundwork had been put into getting to that day. And one of the beautiful things was I didn't know what I was really going in for. So no expectation, no idea. It was in the days where there was way less publicized about all of this world. So there wasn't so much for me to have read beforehand or watched beforehand or spoken to people beforehand. So I stepped into this ceremonious space with that, in a way, quite luxurious way of non-expectation, of not knowing, just curiosity of taking a big leap.
Can you quickly tell us what ayahuasca ceremony is and what the space looked like, perhaps?
Sure. Yes, I see. You're gonna have to bring me up on this quite a lot, because I'm so used to talking about this now as if everybody knows that I sometimes get that
That's
people
my job.
don't.
Yeah, I do the same all the time.
Thank you. Yes. So ayahuasca is a plant medicine, a form of psychedelic. It's a plant that grows in the south of America, in the southern America, usually in the Amazon, around Peru, Colombia, Brazil, and it's brewed into a tea, and it contains an element called DMT. And when one ingests ayahuasca, you are taken into an altered state of consciousness, and through that altered state of consciousness, much can occur. Great insights, great healing, a whole host of different experiences. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail in a bit. The ceremonious aspect from this perspective was it was a group of people. We were together, maybe about 10 people, being hosted by a group of facilitators in a retreat center over a space of a couple of days. And on the day of the ceremony, we would have come together in circle. Through that circle, shared our intentions, what we were coming there for, what our expectations were. We would have both shared and listened, and creating that community bond of doing this within a group. And then during the course of the day, served various doses of this medicine. And then generally, you all have your area where you sit, your mat where you lay. Often with an eye mask on, music being played to guide you, and then off you go into another realm. Everybody experiences this in a different way. So for some, it could just be a perspective change, a change in what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you're hearing. For some others, they may be having recollections of elements of their life that's happened in the past that they're revisiting, perhaps seeing from different viewpoints, from perhaps revisiting some of the things that have caused trauma in the past, or likewise caused joy in the past. And some others may also go as far as to go on into the spiritual realm. And again, what that means for everybody is very unique to that individual person. But for me, it was overwhelming in a beautiful way, that I was for a great deal of that in a very calm space. I always give the image of I was essentially like a newborn baby just lying on my back and having the wisdom of the universe pass in front of my eyes. So You know, when you see a young baby in a pushchair being pushed along, and it just has these big eyes of wonder. And there, you don't know what's going on in that little baby head, but that baby is just in total wonder of whatever's in front of him or her. Essentially, that's what happened to me. I just became this baby on my back, and essentially this enormous encyclopedia of wisdom was just being flicked through in front of me. Really, what happened was I was taken into a place of deep remembering, and it really, for me, opened up. It reconnected me with a level of, for me personally, a level of kind of spiritual connection which had been dormant for a long time, and really catapulted me forward into a completely new realm of consciousness.
It's quite big.
Yes, it was. Yeah, it was at the time, it was so big. It's like, what is this and what was that, especially in the time that came after. And having then been plunged into then a period that hasn't now stopped of exploration and investigating and reading, I came across the term, which is often bandied around now in this scene, of the mystic experience. And when I heard and read that, it was very much like, oh, this is handy. That's exactly what it was. This was a fully mystical experience. And I feel so blessed to have had that.
Mystery is so underrated. And I feel like mystic and mystery, I don't actually know this, but I feel like they're very like associated words, aren't they? Presumably the root is the same. And where you said in the stuff that you wrote about yourself, mystery is really important. So I feel like a mystic is entering into a mystery. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And essentially what the mystic is doing is developing that individual and very personal relationship with the divine, as to however you define the divine. So you're walking your own path and developing that own deeper intuitive wisdom and connection with that which is bigger than you.
Did you feel like you had encountered the divine?
In that ceremony, 100%. I was in the realm of the divine, and it's so hard to put that into words. But when you just know.
Mm-hmm. I do know. Yeah, I do know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm saying that. Oh yeah, of course, not everybody does, and not everybody will.
I was just thinking about it. Did I know or did I not? I was just thinking, like, do I know what he means? Yeah, I do.
And just that deep sense of knowing, and that deep sense of, and this has happened. This was the first time, and for me again, psychedelics are a very important component of my own spiritual practice, and they do have for me a deeply spiritual practice. So for me, they are also a vehicle to deepen that,
like a portal
relationship
into that space. And is that true for other people, or something that is unique to your journey?
No, it's not unique to mine. For some, everybody, both the beauty and the challenge of working with psychedelics and plant medicines is you never know what you're going to get. When even if you want something, it's not necessarily going to happen. So from one day to the next, you could be having one ceremony which is very spiritual and very mystical, and then the next one is absolutely not, and it's way more about your own process and way more about your use. I'm just throwing up an example there. It could be something completely different, and even within a single ceremony, you can be having a mystical moment, let's say, then the next minute you could be taken somewhere completely different.
Do we choose our journey? Were you prepared at that point, having done all this preparatory work all your life? Were you in a place where you were ready to receive that experience, and you were consciously or unconsciously perhaps choosing that experience over any other kind of experience where someone else might be needing to address trauma that they hadn't addressed before? Is there some kind of level of decision making involved in where we go next in that portal?
I'm going to take a pause there for a minute to think how I answer that. Yeah, intentionality is a really important part of this work. So before ever going in to do one of these ceremonies, the identification and understanding of what the intentionality behind it is a very important component of the preparation phase before going into ceremony. So most people have an idea of what that theme, that intention, let's say, is. Some people it might just be curiosity, and then through that curiosity you have to be a little bit, maybe become a little bit nuanced. For some it really might be, I'm trying to do something very specific. But still, even if you're trying then to go and do something specific, the means to be getting to that point can often be a very meandering path, and it's not like you just go from A to B and have answer. For me, I certainly wasn't going in there expecting that. I can genuinely say I really had no expectation. All I knew was I was ready to do it, and I was being taken there by some curiosity, which was even bigger than curiosity. I just knew that I was going to do this, and I was ready to do this. And I do know now that I entered it at a place in time where I was very well prepared to just go in and let go and let me be taken on the ride that was going to develop in front of me. So I hadn't actually, let's say, done specific, let's say, homework in the weeks before that, apart from, so it's funny as I'm correcting myself as I talk, because I'm doing that thing of underestimating what was going on. Lots of mindfulness practice in the weeks before, a very strict diet in the week before. That's often what you do before these ceremonies. So we'd done that, but then everybody in that room had also done that. But maybe we'd done it to different degrees, how I decide to do my diet might have been stricter than somebody else, how conscious I had become in the activities that I did in the weeks prior. I don't know what the others were doing. But what I do see is that with the benefit of hindsight, I see lots and lots and lots of steps that had happened in all the years prior to this that had got me to that stage. So I had a nice foundation, let's say, to be going into this ceremony.
And you weren't afraid, but again, by the sounds of things?
No, not afraid. I wasn't afraid in this. Well, I wasn't afraid, but there was a deep-seated sense of trepidation, like, what the hell are we going to go and do? What's going to happen? And to be honest, that I still have that to this day. There's never a time where I don't go into ceremony if I'm doing the work myself. When up until the very minute that it's happening, there's a part of me that's going, or there's a part of me that's scared, or there's a part of me that's going, are you ready? And I consider that part a very valuable part of this entire process, because it helps ground you and it helps you remember the sanctity of what you're about to go and do.
So this particular ceremony and the plant used within this ceremony, I'm intrigued to know how people discovered it, where it's come from, why, how it's ended up being a thing that people are using now. So really the main question is, what is it? How was it discovered? What are its historical uses? Is the first question.
Yeah, I'd like to we're going to talk about two different compounds, because I work a lot with this plant personally, and in my work I work with a different one, but the stories are quite similar. The ceremony that we've just been talking about was me working with ayahuasca. Ayahuasca, as I said before, it grows in the jungles of South America. It's actually, the brew itself is actually a combination of two different plants, a vine and a leaf, and they're actually needed together in combination to actually activate and work. So there is this whole conjecture of how this was ever discovered, that two plants out of the thousands of plants that exist in the Amazon, how people eventually worked out that this one should be with this one, and this combination needs to be with this combination to affect this. Many say that it was the plants speaking to the people that enabled this to happen, because again, the people that have been the stewards of this wisdom over the millennia that it's been used have a completely different relationship with the natural world than we do here in the northern hemisphere. So it's been used, as I just said, for thousands of years in that part of the world as a tool for healing, of spiritual connection, of community. It's been, if you go back to the times of the conquistadors, for example, when they invaded Southern America, you see them reporting on on the ceremonious use of different plants. So in South America, you have more the use of ayahuasca or other cactus-based plants. For example, San Pedro. And then a bit further up in the Americas, in Central America and Mexico, you have more of a tradition of working with mushrooms. But when the West arrived in that part of the world, they found the peoples there ceremoniously engaging with these different plants to attain altered states of consciousness. And then you also go back, if you look back in historic oracles further back than that, so in sculptures, in archaeological remains, you find that the remains of and evidence of their use over many thousands of years. And then it wasn't really until the 50s and 60s that the awareness of these compounds and their benefits arrived to us here in the Northern Hemisphere. So particularly one of the kind of the big bangs was, let's say, the discovery by a Western audience of the Mazatec peoples in Mexico, who were using the ceremonious mushroom to achieve altered states. And it was through them visiting and then bringing that awareness back to the West that it then became a thing, and then started kind of the first waves of experimentation in using these compounds for the betterment of humankind in our societies, because obviously they have been being used in others forever. And there is, documented proof that as long as humans have been existing, wherever we've been existing, we've been using altered states of consciousness as part of our ceremonious practices. It's just in some parts of the world, those have been eradicated or died out, and in others, thankfully, they were kept alive. So it's through their stewardship, this wisdom, that we're now being able to benefit.
And it's so interesting, as ever, the way in which things are suddenly treated with suspicion that really have no business being treated with suspicion. I'm going to ask you to share with our listeners what you do and what it involves. I don't know, just tell everyone about your passion for your practice and what that can offer them.
So I run a number of different programs that have incorporated in them the conscious use of psychedelics as a mode for healing and growth. So what does that mean? It means that I provide the framework and the guidance for people that are curious and wanting to incorporate a psychedelic experience into the pathway that they're on. So what that generally involves is walking a path together for a period of time. Trajectory of us walking together is normally over a couple of months, and during those few months, we work on, let's slowing down. So this is all about creating moments where we can begin to slow down and stop and listen and feel to our lived experience, to what's going on. So you mentioned earlier on about the 3 steps of how I try to work with people. So that's about developing a deeper connection, first of all, with ourselves. And then once we're developing and greatening that connection with ourselves, we can hopefully ripple that out and develop a deeper connection with those that are around us, whether that's our family, whether that's our friends, whether that's our work colleagues. And then that ripple connects kind of continues as much as you want it to. You may then be willing and able to and ready to develop a deeper connection with that which is beyond our own kind of daily comprehension. But what we do is, during this preparation process, we really work on connecting with ourselves as systemic beings. So rather than just, often in our lives, we have a narrative that we tell ourselves. This is who I am, and this is what I do, and these are what my problems are, and this is what I like. And it's a very, shall we say, narrow narrative. And what we do together in working through this preparation phase is just try and zoom out a bit and see ourselves from a more systemic perspective. So who am I from a mental perspective, but also who am I from my physical reality? Who am I from my heart reality, my soul reality, maybe my spiritual reality? Where do I fit in my community? How am I affected by my environment? These are just some of the questions that we might use to just pose what's going on in our lives. And the idea of doing all of this is to really then come up with a clear sense of the intention, which is frameworking this work. I said earlier, most people, everybody who gets in touch, there's something that's driving them to get in touch. So there's always something there. We're not just doing this for a bit of fun, because this isn't fun. This is hard work. This is hard work. With nice elements of fun in it. Let's caveat that this isn't all. This isn't all drama.
Miserable time with Nigel.
No, let's not plan us for a miserable time. For that, I incorporate, and I hope to bring. There's hopefully good moments of laughter and joy and happiness.
I can
to all
confirm
of this.
that he will definitely bring you that.
But let's say, the idea is intentionality, right? So this preparation phase, which is always supported with coaching sessions and sessions for you to do on your own and for us then come together, is about really defining this intentionality, but also in preparing oneself on a mind, body, spirit level to then really be ready to then go into ceremony. And then I imagine, you should imagine like the crest of a wave, the process that we go on. So you have this preparation phase that we're going through, and through that, hopefully, you're becoming more and more deeply aware of yourself and what's around you, what's going on. Hopefully, you're being able to incorporate times of stillness, of slowness, of space, because it's in these moments of space where so much of this wisdom starts to appear. And the idea is that when you come here for ceremony, your state of consciousness is already somewhat altered than maybe it would be in an already waking day. You're calmer, you're stiller, you're more open, you're breathing differently. So we incorporate all of these practices in this coaching trajectory. And I keep hearing myself use the word coaching, and I really don't like the term coach or coaching, but it's just something that's coming up.
I always use the word journey because I just can't find anything else.
Yeah, journey, guiding, I really don't.
But it's so annoying, even that annoys me, the journey, having to keep relying on it. So I know what you mean.
And I try to often avoid the word journey. A lot of people use journey regarding the psychedelic component, and you do very much go on a journey. But for me, you're already on a journey when you even arrive with your first email coming to me, and you're still going to be on your journey way after we've stopped working with each other, because we're always on a journey. At the peak point of this trajectory is then usually I usually work one-on-one, although I am just starting to offer small retreats as well. But we're going to just focus on the one-on-one thing here. Is the hosting of a private ceremony, so working one-on-one with a participant to then really go in deep and sit with the medicine. And that's usually a full day. It's a full day session. And we haven't got enough time to go into everything that you're going to be doing in that time. But what we're doing is creating the space and the setting and the environment for you to hopefully let go as much as you can and step into that position of vulnerability to really connect with what it is that needs to come up in that instance.
So what might be quite good then for our listeners would be to do another podcast where we talk about exactly what might happen.
Yeah, we could do that.
And the space that they'll be in and what that might feel like and look like. And
sure.
I agree that we don't have time for that, but I think that would be really helpful for people in feeling safe around it. So and
that's there's so much, like as you've mentioned this word safe a number of times, and that's an absolutely integral component, that the person who is doing this needs to feel utterly safe and utterly ready, both in themselves and then both in the environment they're in and the people that they're with. So if they're just, for example, with me, or even if you're in a group situation, that feeling of safety and being held enables you to be able to do the work. And I think that's really what my job is. My job is holding. So I'm there to hold the space, and I'm also there to hold you. And I'm there to hold you on an physical, emotional, spiritual level, whatever is needed. So you're fully able to kind of flop into whatever it is that needs to come up. And
there's a huge exercise in trust, isn't it?
It's an enormous exercise in trust.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely. And that's
which is
why,
so important.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something that we do need to learn.
Yeah. Yes, this is not possible to do without doing that. And it all comes down, so it's also about developing this sense of inner. So much of this work that we're doing is getting people in contact with their intuitive self. So what's your intuitive self saying? Can I trust this person? Can I trust myself to go and do this? Do I want to go and do this? Am I ready?
Yeah.
If I'm not ready now, maybe I'll do it. Then we stop. Or do we do this again in a couple of weeks or a couple of months?
Yeah.
It's all about listening. But
I don't know why it's taken me so long to get to a point of understanding.
Yeah.
Like, it's just ridiculous.
Yes.
All your built-in mechanisms come with you when you're born. Somehow you can spend 50 years of your life avoiding them when all along you've got a system of alarms going off. And just deciding to hear them or not, or finding a space where you can hear them.
Yeah.
I do think that is one of the most important lessons in life.
Yeah.
Come to me way too late.
Yeah. And just to kind of keep this as short as it already isn't, after ceremony, we then work together through a process of integration as well. So when all the insights, all of what's occurred when we've been working with the medicine, and I'm going to come back to that point in a minute. What do we do with it? How do we become the embodiment of our insights? How do we use them, work with them, become them? Mm-hmm. Because that's essentially the most important thing. We're doing this for transformation. We're doing this to become better versions of ourselves, or to become more healed, or to become more aware. But you actually have to do the work to enable that to happen. So, and one last thing, you keep hearing me use the word medicine, and in that sense I'm using that as a term for the psychedelic that we're working with in this case. And in this case it's working with psilocybin, which is what is the psychedelic compound which commonly grows in what most people will know as term magic mushrooms. Here in the Netherlands we actually have we are able to work legally with truffles. So you have, not going into too much biology, but a mushroom is the fruiting body of a fungus that in the ground you have, if the mushroom doesn't come through, you have a truffle form, and that is it contains the same compound. It's the same let's say organism, but that contains the compound psilocybin, and we are working with that.
So the Netherlands, as ever, is ahead of us in every regard. Yeah,
we're one of the few places around the world that are legally able to work across the board with this compound. Again, a caveat: many people will be probably reading in the press about the developments of psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, and actually using psychedelics to tackle or to help heal significant mental health issues. That's where we're going into slightly, obviously, into grayer territory, because in that territory it really is regulated, and still from a psychotherapy perspective it's still not incorporated into the care system yet, and will be. It's like most countries, still a bit of a time away. There are clinical trials happening, etc. What we're doing here, what I'm doing, and what my fellow guides are doing in the Guild of Guides, for example, is we are generally working with what we often term healthy normals. So people who aren't at the clinical end, so the serious clinical end, we're working with the remainder of the population who are still wanting to better themselves.
That's another way of keeping things safe, isn't it? And what I'm hearing you say is that this is not an unregulated, dangerous thing that's happening out there. The Netherlands will have stringent checks. The whole thing will be very carefully monitored. So I think that's really important to say, because I think there is a sense of it being, I don't know, illegal or dangerous or something. And from what I've seen and what I've heard, and anyone listening to you, Nigel, will be fully aware that that's just nonsense. And it's clearly very exciting as well for people, for personal development and for peace of mind and for the community.
It is very exciting, but it also has to. There always has to be this caveat that it's not a magic bullet. It comes with a high degree of responsibility and care that's needed, and it's not suitable for everybody. In fact, it's not suitable for a lot of people, and there has to be serious consideration before going and doing something like this. But yeah, the benefits are beautiful for those who are able and are ready.
And can you work with people who maybe can't take the medicine but could benefit from your coaching style and your experience on their journey?
Yes, of course. So yeah, actually, that's a lovely question. Yeah, psychedelics, yeah, as you said, aren't for everybody, but this process that we're using, this consciousness process, shall we call it, on developing this deeper connection, can be done by anybody. And what we can do is use many other different tools to deepen that level of awareness. So that might be using more mindfulness, it might be incorporating meditation, it might be looking at what we eat, it might be, and something I use a lot in my work is nature and the beauty of working outside and being outside. I'll give you an example. I try and go every year on a personal retreat just on my own to do a nature solo, and that involves me going into a deserted woodland and just sitting for, well, last year I did 24 hours.
I remember you telling me about this and just finding the whole thing terrifying.
Yeah, you don't move. I didn't move for, well, I have a circle of, let's say 3 meters across. I have a mat to sleep on and water, and that's it for 24 hours. This year I'm going to attempt to do 36.
It's like a monk.
Yeah, and that process of sitting and connecting, and everything shifts, time shifts, your relationship with what's around you shifts, and that in itself then can create an alternate state of consciousness. So tools like that can be used, and that's an extreme version of that's another version of working with consciousness, but just going for a walk, just sitting by a river, just collecting things when you're out for your walk, and using those as signposts for our coaching sessions, for example, are ways that we can work with each other. So there's most definitely a way for us to
I think it's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, you're talking about ceremonies in the way that I understand them, which is why we hooked up in the first place, I think. It is so important to think of ceremony in terms of healing and not in terms of necessarily occasion. If you are not someone who's met the person you want to be romantically involved in, you don't have to. I mean, this is what worries me, that people feel they have to be marrying into a monogamous relationship in order to have any kind of ceremony that celebrates love. And I just feel like we need to move on from that. That's a whole other tale, I suppose. So you've shared brilliantly and made things really, really clear for us. And I now feel all it's done is whet my appetite. So you're going to have to come back. I loved listening to you talk about it. I have got another question for you, which is whether you have any regrets about any ceremonies that you've had in your life, or anything that you wish you had done differently ceremonially.
Yeah, I think I've been to quite a few underwhelming ceremonies in my life, many of which that have been weddings or burials where someone
None of them were mine. None of them were mine.
Absolute caveat. None of them were yours, Jess. Where people have just followed a rule book or a set of instructions, and there's none of this in it.
Yeah.
This is such an important component of any form of ceremony.
If you're listening to this on a podcast, Nigel's holding his chest where all our emotion sits, and all our love, really, and our heart. So yeah. No, and I knew exactly what you meant. Yeah.
Yeah, and the purpose of ceremony is to connect on that deeper level. So if the ceremony itself doesn't have it in, how's the people that are invited to the ceremony meant to get to that point? And a regret sometimes, I'm still learning. I'm stepping into this role of ceremony leader in different aspects. And for me, some regrets have always been when the doubt has crept in. Like, do I dare bring this ritual into this ceremony?
Yes. I agree with you.
There have been times when I have let that voice, the doubtful voice overruled my knowing hand on chest moment. And that's been something I've regretted, because I knew it would actually have been good. Have I got time just to share another example or something?
Yeah. We're going to make it a little bit of a longer episode.
I'll keep it really brief. But I give you an example of a moment in life. It actually wasn't a moment in my life. It was a moment in my parents' life, who hosted a party a few years ago for milestones in their lives, and it was a party, and that was wonderful because it was post-COVID, and the purpose of a party post-COVID was more enormous than even just the 2 milestones we were celebrating, that bringing together of community for the first time after that horrible episode. And I really felt, we're not a family that does speeches, we're not a family that kind of does things around there. And for me, I thought that was lacking. There had to be some moment within this party where everybody could stop, all the chatter could stop. But the big doubting part of me was kind of going, oh yeah, but these people aren't going to like this. They're going to think it's weird. What will people think? And I had it all planned. And literally in the minutes before, I'm like, am I going to do it? I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then in the end, thankfully, I had someone next to me who said, come on, just do it.
Oh my God, did you do it?
And we did it. And all it was just bringing everybody who was there from the party into one central space. And I asked for silence, and I brought candles for everybody. And we all I said something, and I lit a candle, and I passed it to the people next to me. And we all just in silence, just lit a continual chain of candles around this room, with my mum and dad in the center. And they were then surrounded by everybody they knew with this candle in silence for a matter of moments. And then we put them in some prepared like sand pits that we had. And it was so simple, and it was so amazing.
I mean, you've set me off. That's right up my street.
Yeah, it was just how to incorporate a very small ritual or a very small ceremony into a very, very ordinary setting. It doesn't all have to be about churches or, plant medicine ceremonies, which I know are kind of at the extreme end. What this is about the integration of ritual and ceremony into everyday life.
Oh my God, hear. So I told you, everybody, to expect greatness, but I had not expected for myself how much I would love hearing you chat. I feel like you're even over the interweb. You're so calming just being there. And you do honestly look quite holy with the light. It's really fantastic. So, I mean, I've got 2 more questions really. What don't you want for our culture and our society? What don't you want?
I don't want individuality and disconnection. I don't want us walking around disconnected from ourselves and from those people that are around us, and not understanding where that disconnection comes from. If we talk about the word healing, healing is essentially that pathway to becoming more whole. It's about attaining wholeness, which we all are. We all have been, but just cracks have appeared along the way. And what we're doing is, through these processes, just becoming step by step more whole. So what I don't want is us to be walking around unwhole.
I don't say this lightly, and I don't say it very often anymore. And I'm not an American, but I do have to say amen to that. Really,
I'll also say amen to that.
And what's something that makes you hopeful? I would imagine that it's very much connected with what you want or don't want for us.
Yeah, I see there's a really big shift going on. There's great space for this shift to take place in, but there are more and more people who are wanting to understand their truth, who are wanting to heal, become whole, to grow. And it goes right back to what you said at the beginning about this shift in consciousness as we as individuals become more aware, and as we grow, hopefully that can also lead to a heightening of our collective consciousness. And for me, that's what makes me very hopeful, because there is a shift going, and let's just all do our bit to keep it shifting.
And you know what? My bit, I realise, is doing this podcast so that I can introduce the world to amazing people like you with amazing stories like yours. I feel I'm in a very privileged position in my work because I hear hopeful stories alongside devastating stories, but I meet people and I hear people and I hear the stories of people that other people won't hear. So my way of connecting is to do this. It actually really is interesting hearing you say that. That is why I'm so excited about what I do, because I am aiming to connect with a broader community and to hopefully share stories of hope and connection within that. So that's perfect. Thanks so much for coming. I feel that well, maybe you are massively famous and I just don't really know stuff like that, but you should be. You should be all over the place because you're amazing. And I'm just so grateful for your time. It's been beautiful.
Thank you.